for this climate is the attitude of the media outlets, I think. We, as the Hrant Dink Foundation, have launched Media Watch on Hate Speech project in 2009 in order to draw attention to the media language in Turkey that provokes slanders and otherizes, and to discuss the ways to fight against hate speech. So here I should note that the foundation was founded in 2007, thank you, with the name of Hrant Dink, who was an Armenian journalist in Turkey, and he was the founder of Agos newspaper, which is an Armenian newspaper publishing in two languages, in Turkish and in Armenian. And he was murdered in 2007 by a 17-year-old nationalist in front of his newspaper's building. And he was a victim of a hate crime, and this event is one of the most referred events in Turkey when we talk about hate speech and hate crimes, because before his murder, he hardly targeted by the media and by newspapers with his Armenian identity and with his opinions. And after his murder, during the trial of his murderer, the murderer said that he did not know Hrant Dink personally, but he had read from newspapers that Hrant Dink was an enemy of the Turks. So we can easily see the effects of the media in such hate crimes in this example. So the general objective of this project, this hate speech project, is to combat racism and discrimination. And a more specific objective is to combat hate speech targeting ethnic and religious communities in the media. And with this project, we also aim to contribute to fostering respect of human rights in the media, strengthen the role of NGOs in monitoring and advocacy non-discrimination, and to contribute to promoting respect to minorities and different identities in the society. So today I will present you how Turkey's media produce and reproduce hatred against different identities by focusing on print media based on our findings of the study that we are implementing in this, within the scope of this hate speech project. So first of all, let me introduce a general situation of the media in Turkey. In Turkey, we frequently witness the use of discriminatory language on media. The provocative, racist, and discriminatory language used in the news becomes an instrument that strengthens stereotypes, feeling of hostility, and discrimination in society. Of course, there are universal and national principles of journalism, and that some media organizations have even issued their own codes of ethics, but we can still see that many journalistic end products have to violate these principles. The use of such language caused to become interiorized a widespread prejudice against vulnerable groups in society, and targeted individuals and groups become restless and silent, and they are forced to renounce their right to participate in social and political life, which is indispensable for the democracy, as we all know. Such provocative and stigmatizing use of language can sometimes result in attacks on the members or gathering places of antagonized groups. But what is the reason of such using such a discourse on media, and what it shows us? Due to various reasons, Turkey has been witnessing polarization between various segments of society, and intolerance towards the different and the other is becoming more and more widespread. Here we have to underline that the creating the other and polarization is not something specific to Turkey. And since the beginning of 19th century nation states, which is based on nationalist, centralist and secular structure, need to constantly produce others to legitimize themselves. So the Republic of Turkey also needed to have the same project, and during its process of creating a new nation, Turkey followed two important steps. We can resume like that. And first step was to assimilate Muslims from different ethnic identities. So the first step was an assimilation project, and here we are mostly talking about Kurdish population in Turkey. And the second project was implemented on non-Muslim communities such as Greeks and Armenian who lived in Turkey. And with different methods, the number of non-Muslim population has tried to be decreased, such as exchange of population, immigration from the outside the country, and different methods. So I should also explain here that I use the word of other as a sociological nation to define identities different from majority in terms of religious, ethnic and cultural characteristics. Because the definition of the minority depends on the context of the country that we are talking about. For example, in Turkey, non-Muslims are legally identified as minority according to the Treaty of Lausanne. But when we say others now, I want to refer to all vulnerable ethnic and religious identities, along with women and LGBTI individuals who also suffer from discrimination. So, when we look at the latest story of Turkey, lots of policies and social change have increased polarization between different identities in society. Conflicts in South Anatolia ongoing for years between the state and Kurdish population, and the sudden demographic change in Turkey caused by forced displacement of people due to this conflict, as well as the economic, social, and cultural conflicts have all played a role in the escalation of tension between communities. In addition, developments in the Middle East, discussion around the Kurdish and Armenian questions lead to individuals and institutions that have a suggestion for solution to be targeted and certain ethnic groups to be portrayed as enemies. Finally, the way Taksim Gezi Park events were covered on Medea was significant as it shows how media can foster polarization in the society. So during these processes, as a result of discriminatory language used in the public sphere, the manifestation of hostile perception and attitudes towards different groups and individuals has become an important and ever-growing problem in Turkey. Even opinion leaders such as government officials, opposition leaders and public servants use such racist and discriminating language, as it is well known the claim of government officials that the Taksim Gezi Park events are organized by foreign agents, and the discourse of interest rate lobby resulted in certain groups, the Jewish identity being the first among them to be targeted. So the others are those who are usually subject of hate speech and discrimination in daily life, in discourses of politicians, in textbooks, in publications, and of course in media. So the media, which is one of the most important instruments of the nation's state, spread public information and explicit or implicit opinions about different identities and events on which the members of the social majority have little direct information. So more importantly, the media provides an ideological framework which can also present a means of legitimizing discrimination and prejudice regarding minority groups. Media, which is often defined as the fourth estate, is one of the most effective cultural transmitters. So it has the power to highlight the diversity and differences. But it can also be extremely instrumental and guiding in terms of spreading or banalizing a conflict. So if the media behaves irresponsibly and carelessly, it can very easily strengthen racism and hatred between people. And worse at it can legitimize and justify such attitudes. So as I mentioned before, the Media Watch on Hate Speech project that we are implementing since 2009 aims to draw attention to such discourses used by the media and to encourage the decrease of this discriminatory language and hate speech which target vulnerable identities in Turkey. And within the framework of this project, the national and local press are monitored, scanned, and the news stories and opinion columns that feature discriminatory and alienating discourse are identified, analyzed, and brought to public attention through reports and the website. Here you can see the website. And within the scope of this hate speech focused media monitoring study, all national newspapers and approximately 500 local newspapers are monitored by a media monitoring center according to a set of predetermined keywords. And the keywords are such name of the name of the identity, like Kurdish, Armenian, Jews, and we have some keywords as adjectives such as separatists or Turkish enemy, etc. So the main focus of this monitoring is to determine hate speech based on ethnicity and religious identity, but along with these speech, sexist and homophobic discourse are also monitoring. And the study employs the critical discourse analysis and that it is often used in media studies. And in identifying hate speech in news stories and opinion columns, the recommendation established by Council of Europe in 1997 was taken as a basis. You can see the definition on the slide, so I won't read it again. And additionally, we determined 4 categories in order to facilitate the understanding of hate speech, which is expressed in an implicit or explicit manner in the media. So you can see the categories that are determined by us in the slide. So news items are categorized in line with the characteristic of the discourse being used. So the first category here means any discourse that feature the elements of negative generalization or negative attribution targeting a community based on specific incidents. And the second one, so clear, I think. And the third one, any discourse that includes hostile expression about the community. And the last one includes discourse that uses various aspects of one's inherent identity as an element of hate, humiliation, or symbolization. So with this methodology, we monitor print media, and once we identify news stories and columns that contain such discourse, we announce and expose them with short synopsis on our project website that we saw in previous slides and on the project social media accounts. And every 4 months we publish periodical reports in 2 languages, in Turkish and English. So you can reach them through our website in English once. And as a novelty, since the beginning of 2013, we also publish discriminatory discourse reports. Focusing on a certain subject matter, a specific research method is determined and discourse analysis is performed in these reports. The aim of these analyses is to uncover pieces of discourse that are formulated in relatively implicit manner and that covertly conveys discriminating and alienating messages. In these reports, we mainly focus on mainstream media because in recent years we observed that we don't see mainstream media, mainstream newspapers in hate speech statistics, and they don't use hate speech so frequently because they know the definition of the hate speech that I showed in previous slides, and they don't use it. Maybe we can interpret this situation as a development, but not. But we can say that. But in reality, it doesn't mean that they don't produce or reproduce discrimination anymore. Contrary, the language that they use is so implicit to be defined as hate speech. So, and these discourse, these news items, which explicitly target ethnic and religious groups by giving its name in the same article, by defining them very explicitly can only be defined as hate speech, but they don't use in such way. So the most important reason to prepare this discriminatory discourse report is to demonstrate the language of discrimination that mass media use. So the first media study on discriminatory discourse involved the examination of discourse constructed around the Black Sea visit of the People's Democratic Congress members that included deputies from the Peace and Democracy Party, which is the party of Kurdish population mostly, and there were a lynch attempt of the population of Black Sea against the deputies there. So we analyzed the news items publishing about this event. And for the second report of the year, all the news articles and opinion columns published during the first week of the Gezi Park events. And finally, Alevis was chosen to be the subject matter of the last report of 2013. And we published these reports, additional to hate speech reports. So, the findings of the last report, which covers September-December period of 2013, shows that a considerable increase in the number of incidents of hate speech has taken place compared to the other periods studied during the same year. And you can see the graph here, I think. And although there are a variety of topics through which hate speech is generated, an increase of conservative press, news items targeting Christians due to the Christmas season, and an increase in writings criticizing the proposed law on hate crimes stand out. And to explain this situation, we should also consider that Turkey had a local election in March, and we all know that the discussion started months ago, so it also affected the statistics, we think. And in this graph, we saw the targeted groups by hate speech and newspapers. So here, for example, Syrian refugees, you see there, it's a new category for us in this graph. So in this graph, another important point, so we can say again that political and social agenda affects directly the hate speech produced by media. And in this graph, another important point that we have to draw attention is the first three target groups, Armenians, Jews, and Christians. It's important because these three categories are always there, they never change. They are always the first three category. Maybe according to the political agenda, they switch together each other, but they are always there. So they are always constant enemies of Turkey, according to writers of the producer of hate speech. And when we look at the situation of Kurdish population, they are the fourth one in this graph, and they are always one of the most targeted groups in printed media. But what makes them different from the first three categories? It's the religion. They are generally Muslim. So while monitoring news items, we observe differentiation between good and bad Kurds, and when the articles talks about Kurdish population, Kurdish identity, it often defends that Kurdish are religious fellow because they are Muslim, but if they are addicted to be a part of a Kurdish movement, they are generally defined as internal enemies. So usually we observe that Kurdish identity is handled with along with terrorism, crime, or honor killing. They show that the honor killing is a tradition of Kurdish population, but normally we know that it's not specific to Kurdish population. It's also seen in other identities. And as a result of these items, a negative perception is strengthened by the media about Kurdish population. And there are also other identities that we never see in this graph, such as Roma people, for example, but we still know that in daily life and in political level, Roma people are one of the ethnic minorities that suffer from discrimination in Turkey. So the invisibility is also another way to discriminate or even ignore an identity. We can more or less say the same thing about LGBT individuals. Actually, within the scope of our media monitoring work, we analyze news items which contain hate speech against women and LGBT individuals in a different graph. So, in this graph you can see the distribution of news items which are against LGBT individuals and women, and also transsexuals. Here it should be noted that frequently targeted individuals defined as travested, which is a common mistake in Turkey's print media caused by the lack of information. They all defined as travested, all LGBT people. So another important finding is the fact that hate speech targeting LGBT individuals and women is observed more frequently in news stories than in opinion columns. Considering that the hate speech towards ethnic and religious identities are generally observed in opinion columns, like you can see in this graph, we can say that when we talk about LGBTI individuals and women, such discourses can penetrate more easily into news articles which claim to be objective normally. So, to summarize what I say until now, the language is by the media, the reference that it gives, its relations with different political and social actors with different identities, the visuals that it uses extra shows us their stance in terms of the political, the dominant politics. And all of these are important factors for reconstruction of identity. And additionally, they hardly affect collective memory and the negative perception of the society about different identities, which is strengthened by the media. So thank you for listening.